So this is me, and I'm a healthy building consultant, which is a concept that is kind of, I felt as though we were building scientists, but we were ignoring ventilation and we were ignoring the chemicals that were in the materials. So I decided to coin something called a healthy building scientist who's very sensitive and aware of those conditions. So I'm a subject matter expert for Hayward Score. You can go online. It's a free assessment tool that talks about the house type, ask questions, ask about your behaviors and your symptoms, and we give you a score as to what's actually happening to help you determine if your home is impacting your health. And I will give you several examples today of how that can actually happen to a variety of people. And you may have some other stories you want to share with us in the background. That'd be great. So if you have something that's been either some client or yourself, those are all good things to actually to see. So we're going to go through briefly what's a healthy home. Let's talk about the micro macros. We go through some of these. There's an overlap between energy efficient and healthy homes, and changing the language. One thing I do want to go back to, sorry, real quick, is that the title was assessing and selling healthy benefits, and I want to make sure we're talking about the home as the benefit. So it really is not something you want to talk about when you're dealing with occupants about them becoming healthy. It's a real fine line as to whether or not they will or will not improve their health based on all things you do in your home. So that's something you never want to promise. You want to promise that you're going to do evidence-based best practices, and these are the things that have had success with many other people. But there's no guarantee that any of your symptoms will become reduced, and it's really good that you train your staff to do that. So one of the things you're going to learn today is that if you just change the language, most of the things you're doing right now are healthy upgrades. They are healthy installations. They are healthy designs. All those things are actually have huge health impacts. So we're doing the same stuff, but we are not talking about the health impact, nor are we tracking them. So one of the words you'll hear today is weatherization versus weatherization. So weatherization, we'll talk about just one of them, and that is that you're weatherizing the house. You're doing, upgrades from insulation, air sealing, improving the thermal boundary, reducing particulates is a possibility. But in general, there's just a few basic things that we do for most energy assessments, and we'll talk about those as actually being the health benefits that are built in. The other one is weatherization as a statewide program. So many of them are doing stuff that's very similar to what you may do in your private practice, but they also have some good studies and some great information. So you may hear weatherization, just assume it's talking about improving the performance of the home in general. This is an actual definition. I usually don't read the slides, but I'll read this one so it goes quickly. So a healthy home is a home designed, construction, maintained, or rehabilitated in the manner that supports the health of its residents. So it's a very generic term. It's used by CDC and HUD and a variety of other stuff, but it really could go much further in terms of describing some of the stuff we do in the homes. It's just generic. So maybe it is the design and maintain that actually do that. So I mentioned this a second ago, and here's a slide to reiterate it. So there are things in your home that we would talk about: indoor air quality and filtration and ventilation. All those things are huge components. Even the thermal boundary is a major component to have a healthy home, but you're talking about the home as being healthy. And again, you're clarifying that you're not talking about that you will become healthy. And that's a real fine line that a lot of people get in trouble when they talk to the occupants, because the occupants say, my child's got asthma, my family has breathing challenges. What can you do to fix that? And the reality is I can't do anything to fix it. I can actually try and improve the conditions that I found here, and it may actually have some benefits. You may have seen this on a variety of stuff that's out there for social media, but what it's talking about here on the left side is how much time do you spend in your home or in a car or in a restaurant or basically indoors, and what are you doing with that? And so, normally, again, this is pre-COVID, is you're probably spending about 70% of your time in home. That may have changed drastically in the last 6, 7 months. On the right side, this is talking about the social factors. Most people think that your health risk or your health issues or conditions could be from your genes or biology or your lifestyle, but it comes down to actually your societal and interactions and where you grow up and how you grow up and the environment that you engage in and the kind of home you live in or lived in as a kid, and even to the point where the genetic may have been from the social conditions from your mother or grandmother. But in general, our environment impacts us more than the other things that we think about as actually having an impact on us. One of the things that I try to remind people of that is that we are really, as this group is aware of the complex of homes and how many pieces and parts all go together and put together by hundreds of people to try and all work together. And we know some of the challenges, but bodies are way more complicated than homes. And when you put these together, it is impossible to guarantee or talk about some successes. So you think about one thing is super complex and the other one is even, infinitely complex. Together, there's never something that's a one-stop, one simple solution that happens. You could have a family where one person has serious allergies to something and the other people are surprised that that's even happening. Okay, so here's my first question for you. What does clean smell like? So you're welcome to throw it in the question panels, or what do you think clean smells like? And I'll come back to the answers in a second. So these are two documents that I'm going to focus on briefly about some of the benefits, things you're doing right now in the homes. Okay, one is from the EPA and one's from the DOE. It's kind of a private funded through E for the Future. I have the links here. I'll throw those into the question panel here in a few minutes. But based on pulling these apart and seeing what are some of the benefits. So here's one that's very simple. On the left side, you can see things that you're probably doing from air sealing. The people are coming there to do heating system just upgrades or just tweaking it, not necessarily replacing it, and a variety of ventilation upgrades that are happening and doing ventilation with cooking appliances which have high particulates. All of those ended up having some energy possibility, but have huge health impacts that were reduced and documented in the homes themselves. So I took a bunch of these things and key things, kind of throw them together. So I know this is like, holy cow, Joe, a lot of stuff on the slide here. But in general, on the left side are things that were reduced from dampness and mold and risk of cancer. Your energy bill went down, which is something that also allows you to have more money to do more things. So depressions was reduced, days off work and school. These are secondary benefits of the things we're doing as energy upgrades in the house. So when you look at all these things that we do in the house, these are the major improvements on the right side, from general health and mental health and respiratory issues. Upper and lower respiratory symptoms are reduced. These are all from doing, simple stuff in the HVAC system, thermal boundary, and air sealing. These are the benefits that come from that. So when you think about what we're doing weatherization, these are healthy upgrades. We just don't use that language, nor are we documenting those things. So one of the things that I encourage you to do is try and see if you can't do some way of confirming to get people to not just say, "Oh, I love my home. I feel so much better," but try and get them to kind of quantify that. Like, "Oh yeah, well my one daughter has asthma, and since you guys have been to the house last year, we have not had to go back to the hospital." That is huge documentation and a great way to show the benefits of what you're doing in the home, not just that I felt more comfortable, but that those comfort values actually added up to values in their house. These are some of the stuff that comes from weatherization in general, but all the money that's spent, if you spend $1 invested, you can get as much as just under $3 back. So people with asthma reported fewer ER visits. So a lot of these things are real simple stuff that we just only document in a few parts of the industry. So I really think our industry could do a much better job of saying, you know what, these are things we're doing, and let's find a way to do that. Hayward score is one solution for that. I'm not here to promote any way to do that, but any way that you can find these benefits, because the ultimate goal is to get insurance companies to say, you know what, we spent $40,000 this year on this child on asthma conditions in the home, at the hospital, and let's go to the home and see if we can't improve these conditions and maybe spend less than $10,000 and get this child to not keep coming back year after year. So when we get to that level, we know we have hit the holy grail of the home is impacting our health, and that insurance companies will step up to help do that. Oh, here's the answer. Clean does not have a smell. So if you think clean has a smell, whether it's outside or flowers or whatever those are VOCs, and those are things you're trying to avoid. So those can actually cause allergic reactions or be an issue. So clean does not have a smell. So if you have a smell that you think is clean, I encourage you to think about a better way of doing that. So if there's a problem you're trying to hide, like with Glade plugins or something like that, you need to rethink that and try and find the source or figure out how to do that through ventilation or even potentially carbon filtration. So Harvard did a great study that I'll try to give you some highlights. I do have some more details about what to do in the home, but in general, they were pointing out here that people are looking for these kind of stuff, especially millennials. They're saying, you know what, remodeling, these are consumer trends that people want. contractors to be aware of healthy homes and healthy conditions in their home. So when they're coming to their house, they want to talk about these things. They're great to talk about that. I'm going to improve the air sealing and reduce your energy bill. But in theory, that's kind of a dead conversation. You really want to be talking about the health impacts that can happen when you do these things. There's no guarantee, but you can say that a lot of people have felt that they have a much better indoor air quality. In fact, one way to do that is be like, one of the things we do for a lot of clients like yourself is say that we want to improve the indoor air quality. Is that something you might be interested in? And it's kind of it's a no-brainer kind of question. Like, sure. Well, here's how we do that. It's based upon air sealing and improving the thermal boundary. And recommend think about getting the HVAC contractor or working with somebody that does that to improve those conditions. So here you can see indoor air qualities was one of their the top issues for homeowners and renters on things they want to have concerns about their home that's on their health or how to do those kinds of improvements. If you're not familiar with Joseph Allen, because he's all over Twitter and LinkedIn and all kinds of stuff, I highly recommend you look Joseph Allen up and get his book, Healthy Buildings. It's an easy read. It talks about the business of healthy buildings, especially for commercial buildings, that these are basic investments that actually will benefit the entire company. And he's got lots of other studies that are out there. So again, all of the slides that I have here have lots of links in them. So if you're looking for some of this stuff, you'll have access to that. Some people wanted some data, so I thought I'd just provide some stuff from Hayward Score. We have 70,000 people that have completed the survey, and these are some of the numbers. So our general score goes from 0 to 100, really is around 20 to 100. So these are some of the things that are happening. You can see that the old Iron Belt and the, other places that have a lot of industry were struggling. I really think that maybe California and Florida were lying about the results, but in general, green is good. Darker the red is less good. So I think a few people on the call might be from South Dakota. You guys are struggling up there, so let's figure out what we can do to help you guys. So again, our score is from we'll just call it 20 to 100. People that have lower scores have higher symptoms. So they tell us that if you have, we evaluate the score and then we look at their symptom count, which are not the symptom count does not impact the score. So we're saying that people who have homes that are challenged, poor maintenance, which I'll show in the next slide, shows that they actually have more and more symptoms. So in general, there's no homes where people don't have some type of symptom, but in general, the worse condition of the home, the higher the symptoms that are showing up on our score. These are things that are, again, these are not part of the score itself, but homes that scored very low, we'll say below 20, between 20 to 40, 50 to 70, and 75 and above. So these are things that they reported a lot of. They have a lot of odors, surface dust, sill dust, water stains, and visible mold. And these are described as if you have homes that have poor maintenance. So if you have poor maintenance, these are indicators. So if you said, yeah, our home has not been well maintained, or you drive by a home or you're walking into a home that's poorly maintained, chances are there are a bunch of odors. There's probably a lot of dust because it's a lot of infiltration, contaminant pathways. There probably are water stains and even potential visible mold or suspect mold somewhere in the house. So we're showing that we have data that confirms poorly maintained homes, poorly constructed homes clearly are impacting people's health. So we also followed up with some people, said, hey, okay, now that you know more about your score, and they say, yes, thanks for helping us with that. And they said that they did something. So you can see 30% people, 30% did some type of testing, probably some type of mold test. So they fixed some leaks. They added an HRV. They cleaned their ducts, added humidifiers, so sealed their crawl space. So a lot of these things are things that are clearly related to contractors that are looking to do these types of works and trying to get into homeowners who are looking for this connection here. So these people realize there's something that's impacting their house. So whether you can use this as a marketing tool or do something to try to work with existing clients as well as new clients in your area. I'm going to do a quick assessment as to home as a system. Many of you are familiar with that concept, home as a system. Whatever happens outside is usually impacting inside. So let's just talk about poor drainage. It's a real common simple. It's something I harp about regularly. So when you have poor drainage, that it's not just impacting the moisture load around the house, it's also in the house, and it causes comfort issues, more money for the AC to operate. People requires repairs, foundation issues, potential mold growth from the moisture that's happening. So all these things can lead to stuff like this. If anybody's connected with BPI, these are some slides from Larry Zarker. He's the CEO of BPI right now. So he has his bookcase down. If you notice at the very bottom here, it looks as though there's some issues. Okay, so he's like, "Oh my gosh, I didn't notice that." And then he realized that when he removed the trim and removed the walls and tore out the bookcase, that he had a significant issue. And he realized that his walls had been rotting, and the home's only 30 years old. So they tried to figure out what the issue was and realized that it was outside. It was where his heat pump, the slope came back towards the foundation. So if the HVAC contractor who serviced this unit multiple times and probably installed it sometime in the last 30 years would have noticed that the slope around the back of it, even the slope itself on the unit was not correct, that could be causing issues, and just informed the homeowner like, hey, I noticed the area in the back is kind of sloping back to the foundation. You should go inside and take a look and see if that actually is coming up, coming inside. So if that contractor would have expanded his vision and gone a little past the unit that he was focused on, he could have informed this homeowner. Homeowners who get informed by their contractors on things that are not necessarily their focus feel as though that went above and beyond what they thought they were hiring. And they have a good tendency to want to stay with those types of contractors because they felt that contractor was helping me out and looking out for my future, my health, my family, my costs, or my energy bills. So all those things come into play. So when you see something that may be out of your scope and you let the inform the occupant about it, that is just a great something. Even if this was a renter, the renter could then say, "Hey, the one contractor was out here to fix the AC unit when evaluate that, tune it up. He noticed something that we should check into." So these are the things that actually create a great ability to have long-term clients for you. For those of you on the bottom left who are doing insulation and air sealant upgrades, you can see that this moisture issues that are happening because the gutters didn't extend far enough away and they're probably watering their foundation impacted their insulation. And if you're going to do air sealing, you're now trapping moisture because this moisture probably was able to move through the house because of the poorly sealed. But if you're going to address one thing, you need to make sure you're addressing the holistic approach as to where are my moisture loads and how do I get rid of them. Here's a classic one that I've seen this in Georgia, and that they don't really have a lot of gutters in Georgia, ironically, even though they have a lot of rain. And here's right below the roof drain is these vents for the crawl space that actually are capturing the water that runs right off of the roof. And you can see they ended up with an indoor garden. Most ductwork that happens in many parts of Georgia rarely lasts 15 years. That's a metal ductwork. It just rusts right through, and they don't even notice it because they do a great job of wrapping the insulation. I'll give you one more example. So this is Bill Hayward. He's the founder of Hayward Score. He also owns several lumber yards. He's a very rich man. He does very well. It's a third generation lumberyard family. So he has multiple stores out in California. They focus on new builds, right? So he builds his own house, buys a house. Sorry, he buys his own house, and within a matter of months, his family starts getting sick. Within a matter of year, they actually become unable to almost function. They have to leave the house. His daughter stops growing. His wife becomes infertile, and they can't figure out why. Bill himself becomes so sick he can barely operate his business. He almost has to sell everything. He can barely get out of bed. They couldn't figure out what was impacting them. And he's a rich guy, so they hire the best health specialist to help figure this out. They get some IAQ specialists to come to the house and realize that. Oh, somebody said, well, there's some mold down in the crawl space, but the crawl space is not connected upstairs, right? And that's why I left the IAQ industry many, many years ago, because I'm like, what do you mean the crawl space is not connected? Go get a blower door and I'll tell you how connected it is. So these are the kind of things that when you're able to do things like air sealing, you're able to do a blower door test to confirm some of these, contaminant pathways or exposure pathways that can happen. So they did something that's pretty technically savvy. So many of you want to write this down or go get this device, because what they did was they got to cell phones while his wife was upstairs. Bill went downstairs with a mask on, got out some lemon pledge and sprayed it in the crawl space. And his wife says, "Oh my gosh, I can smell that really quickly." So that means there was a direct connection between the crawl space and upstairs. And so they decided to tear that building down. They went to another site and built a brand new home. So even existing homes, it's not just the issue, it's new homes. And these are one of the things that's happening now is new homes have all kinds of chemicals, and we're making them super airtight. So airtight, a lot of chemicals, poor ventilation is just a recipe for disaster, right? So he built this home. The only thing that should have been in it were formaldehyde and acetone. after vetting all of the chemicals, all the materials, but he ended up with a laundry list of chemicals when they started doing the test. He spent about $40,000 testing the home because he was now hypersensitive to these conditions and needed to make sure that he was addressing them. So now they got the home. He thought it was a nice home, and now realized that when they decided to do some more testing, like, okay, let's close up the house. We're going to do direct monitoring for 2 days, and realize that they were at 1,700 and growing parts per million of VOCs, which you really want to be around below 500, closer to 400 for a total VOC. So he was savvy enough to put in a whole house ventilation HRV system. And when they turned it on, you can see that's what makes the shark fin. Once he turned on the ventilation system, everything dropped dramatically. And you can see at the bottom, these is where people were coming in and out of the house in order to do more work in the home. But in general, without a ventilation system for a super tight home, he would have not been able to live in his brand new home that he just had built. So here's an exciting thing most people aren't familiar with. And if you really want to just learn more about building science or healthy housing principles, BPI has two great things. One of which has been out for a long time. It's Building Science Principles on the left, right? It's a self-guided, it's a reference guide, and you can take the exam whenever you want. There's no prerequisite. It's an online exam and easy to do, and they're on their second edition. What was just released, like literally last month, is a healthy housing principle reference guide and a certificate of knowledge exam. This guide is phenomenal. It is Kevin Kennedy was the main editor, and he has done a phenomenal job of getting together not just some of the best examples, but a huge amount of resources. So if you want to learn more about healthy homes, this is the book to get. And whether you get the exam or not, there's some great benefits that go along here. So many of you are familiar with the building science principles. You're familiar probably with BPI certifications, and then they created a healthy home evaluator, which is actually a credential. You actually have to take an exam for this. So they realized that they needed another basic one. So they came back with healthy housing principles. And when they did the HHE, they didn't really have a good reference guide or how to do a good exam with that. So this actually has done a great job of completing the circle of understanding building science and health impacts as a complete cycle. I think that the building science principles certificate and the healthy housing principles certificate will be a new form of being credentialed for many things that are happening here in the future. So these are the things that they're based upon. So they talk about these are they call them the HUD principles, but they really go beyond HUD. But these are in general the 8 housing principles. Many of them have kind of evaluated. There's been 7 for a long time, but they're how to keep it clean, keep it dry, keep it pest free, contaminant free, and so on. I'm sure you can read the list. So the one that's changed is comfortable. It used to be thermally controlled or energy efficient, but they settled on that if the home is comfortable, then that's a healthy condition. And you can see that the EPA Indoor Air Quality Plus aligns with several of these. They're actually directly related to their certificate that they provide and have a qualified home that's Indoor Air Quality Plus for the EPA. So it covers, again, these are the principles that are there. They're fundamental because they are designed so that a homeowner could understand, just keep it clean, right? As well as a contractor can start with that and then explain that to the occupant and understand that themselves. And then they go into a lot of details that are in there. So I have a resource page for you if you want to look into it. It's basically bpi.org/HHP. You don't want to go there now because otherwise you're going to miss some good stuff. But at the end, you definitely want to come back to that or tag that as a resource. They have some examples of the book, but one of the great things that they had done was that you can see these 9 blocks here in the bottom left. Many of the resources that they wanted to do, they decided not to put them in the book. They decided to put them online. So educational materials and scorings and checklists and key references, all those are online and you have access to them at any time, whether you're a BPI person or not. So they now have one of the best resource pages in general that's out there for anybody who wants to learn more about healthy homes or healthy housing. So I'm going to just give a brief overview. One of the things that I think is a challenge for many people is that there's little training to tell them whether or not they are have the vision to go from energy into some of the healthy sensitivity conditions. That's the macro, micro kind of concept. All right. So if you're using these types of basic stuff, these kind of tools you just can't leave home without, can't go in the house without, and they are simple stuff like what are you seeing, what are you experiencing. So on the left is your diagnostic senses, and on the right is how to use those to relate to people. So are you hearing certain things in the house that maybe your occupant is not? One of the ones that's really crucial is the smell. So when you're walking into a home, you may smell something that your occupants are now no longer smell because it is something that of all of our senses, your olfactory, your smell is able to shut itself off. So there's a really nasty foul smell. You'll smell it, but if you have to be in that environment, within a matter of sometimes just a few minutes to less than a half an hour, your brain will shut it off. It'll say, you know what? I no longer can handle this. It's overloading my senses. I'm just going to ignore it. And it's able to do that. You can't do that with vision or touching stuff. You can't just say, oh, I'm not going to feel these things anymore. You may go into somebody's home and says, "Oh," you'll think because you realize you shouldn't say it out loud, like, "Oh, you have cats," because you could smell something in their house. Meanwhile, they're completely oblivion to the fact that their cat box is a strong odor throughout the house. So these kind of skills that give you an indication of things you're trying to be more sensitive to. So you may be going there to do air sealing and realize you want to add some maybe a ventilation strategy and improve thermal comfort, but there are things that should be indicators, and trust your gut as to things you sense that are happening, and make sure you're engaging the client about things that they've had as experience or what they've done or problem areas, all those kind of things, or that your occupant knows more about the home than you'll ever figure out with or without a blower door or other diagnostic tools. So you're looking for new places. Below the kitchen sink is one place that I normally focus on. It's full of chemicals. There's air leakage back by there. There could be moisture issues, signs of pests. All those kind of things are a great place to understand more about how the person's living. You can see in the sink that they may have some hygiene challenges because they knew somebody was coming over and they chose not to clean their house prior to that. So they're clearly comfortable with some of the things that may be awkward conversations. But your goal is to find out, is there something here I can, you know, give them a handout about what are some healthier cleaning products that are even cheaper as something we promote as a company, and just leave it at that, because now they realize, well, hey, thanks for sharing that with me, I'll look into that. And maybe they don't, but it's just something that's showing that you care about them and their environment. Okay, so we have another poll question for you. So we'll bring that up in the background. And the poll question I'll read out loud. So it's, which of these do you believe is a healthy home upgrade? And some of the options are air sealing, adding insulation, sealing the crawl space, duct sealing, upgrading the air handler filter. So I think you can select multiple. If there's something that should have been on the list, you're like, wait a minute, you forgot to add something, please throw that into the chat or the question menu. And I'll give you a quick minute. So my goal is not here to do polls; it's to kind of get a quick feed from you. So if you have a chance, throw an answer in, because we're going to pull that down and just talk about what some of these are and which one of these is really the healthy home upgrade. So the answer, which should be no surprise, is of course all of them. These are all healthy home upgrades. Some maybe you think of as more valuable than others, but learning a lot from the asthma community is that they don't just go in and do one thing in the house. They try and do multiple upgrades, multiple interventions, multiple things that improve the performance of the house, and then track how those symptoms happen. They don't just go in and be like, you know what, we're going to do air sealing this month, and we'll come back in 2 months and do add insulation or seal the crawl space and see which of those does it. It really doesn't really work that way, and it's not the way to approach a holistic condition in the house. So your goal is to be like, you know what, I'm going to improve the performance of the home and find out that that actually was the best way to go. So there is not one of these that you'd want to really kind of do sometimes without some of the others. And you can track some of them. We've learned that it's really hard to track one thing as a direct indicator of a reduction of symptoms. So I brought these up earlier. So what I try to do is relate them to things we're normally doing in the homes. So here's your keep it principles. Here's some energy efficient measures. And then here's some of the stuff that are the healthy outcomes that are happening in those. So reducing contaminant pathways by doing air sealing. You can see there's a relationship here. And this slide could easily become super dense in terms of the things we're doing, from reducing moisture, improving comfort. So adding exhaust fans or something that's so simple that can actually reduce a huge amount of moisture, combined with air sealing in the house. Insulation is something that you guys are totally familiar with. So in general, the goal is to make for happy, healthy, comfortable users. That's our goal. So I want to go through a series of concepts that go from kind of the energy audit on the left side, healthy home assessments on the right side. Okay, so that these almost translate directly over to things that you think about are energy audits. that are actually healthy home assessments. And people that do healthy home assessments are actually learning more that these are can be actually energy efficient measures. So when you have combustion safety issues, you also have inefficient appliances. So clearly, carbon monoxide tests are just fundamental safety, but those are things that energy auditors should be well in tune with. So kitchen exhaust fans, there's an energy use that happens there. How often is it getting used, and it's removing particulates. When you see moisture damage, you need to find out, the energy auditor may be trying to figure out where is it coming from, and healthy home assessor may be trying to determine what is the damage that's done here and how does this get repaired correctly. So there's a clear overlap that's happening between A and B, and many times it can be the same company, the same person who's trying to figure this out and give advice to make sure it was done correctly and confirm that these things were repaired by a professional. So at the same time, we're actually doing a variety of stuff that you may see that whether or not this is or is not a healthy home or energy assessment means that there is a major blur between them. And we've already learned all of the great health benefits that come from just doing these basic assessments and some basic diagnostics that come with it. So here's an infrared device. Here's a thermal hydrometer. Some people are using the infrared device to determine where my air leakage is with a blower door or just thermal gaps in the environment. So if I wanted to go to the next step would be to use a thermal hydrometer, and now I can find dew point, and now I can determine that what's the moisture load in this environment, and it also has an IR a laser to try and find, is there something in here causing that measurement. So the reality is, on one side I'm missing insulation, maybe it's in the bathroom, and on the other side I'm actually able to determine that that missing insulation is causing a dew point issue and causing condensation, a potential mold growth, and a variety of other issues. So you can see now that energy and a healthy homes assessment have a real fine line as to where one impacts the other and how to do diagnostics on a simple level to determine what are the conditions showing up. You see a stain in the bathroom, it's not always a leak in the roof. A lot of times it could be an internal condensation issue that's happening from lack of insulation or lack of air sealing. So again, we're doing basic. You're walking through the home. You're trying to talk to the occupant, learn more about how they're using their home, looking for defects, pets and pests, deteriorated lead paint for older homes. All these things are things you're trying to be sensitive to about how to improve their thermal comfort and air sealing. And all those things directly relate to clearly some of the conditions that do with healthy homes. So when you see something like this is actually one of those fake conditions. That is actually wallpaper that's been removed and had green paint. So that is not actually visible conditions of moisture, also known as mold. But there are things that may go along with that, like is there a damp smell? Is there smell like odor or other conditions that are happening? Or what did it look as though this was a moisture issue when I got closer into it, or realized no, this is actually just bad wallpaper and some green paint that somebody put on the back of the wall. So again, other things you may be sealing. So a lot of times you see pests or like cockroaches, ants. All those things are moisture issues. Moisture issues come in the fact that you're not doing good air sealing or you have thermal gaps. Air sealing directly can reduce pest infiltration. Even though they're very small, the goal is if I'm actually able to reduce how they get into the house, I'm able to reduce. They want to go someplace else. Their goal is easy pathway. They're looking for moisture and they're looking for food source. So if I can eliminate one or two of those, they're just going to go someplace else and be like, this is a much better place to go live. So let's talk about the average home. Again, some of this may be pre-COVID when we thought about what life was normal. We'll never go back there. We will all be living in a concept of these are things. You're familiar with the EPA talking about that the interior of the home is actually worse than the outside of the home. And the reason that is because stuff gets in the house and it really doesn't leave. It kind of comes in, it says, okay, I'm going to just kind of hang out here. It's sticking to the walls, floors. It doesn't have to stick to soft surfaces, which it does very well, but it actually is adhering to everything you can see right around you in your office, mostly, the surfaces that are there. And it will stay there until it becomes dislodged or becomes airborne again. Maybe it's a moisture issue, maybe it dries out, all those things. So the reason that your indoor air is always worse than outdoors because the outdoor gets in, but it really doesn't do a good job of leaving. It says this is a good place to stay. I'm going to stick here for a while, and all those things become an additive issue that's in there. So we have outside, not fresh air that's coming in, moisture, odors, pests, all this stuff says, you know what, I'm going to just go figure out a way to come in. This is coming from pressure pathways, the people are using the conditions, air leakage, infiltration, all these things are causing exposure pathways, and all these things are finding their way to come inside. And now we're now figuring out a way to deal with them or reduce them or try to filter them. So the goal is to just figure out a way to not let them in or to keep them out or to ventilate them if they are getting in, and filtrate them. So filtration is one of the easiest things that's an add-on for many of the people that I talk with. So I know this is a no-brainer, but you understand the difference between that filtrate that insulation. Many types of insulation are not air barriers. That you need to add an air barrier. So you can see the person on the bottom left with the gloves. He is super cold because it's windy and all that air is moving right through his, sweater mesh. But if the person on the right has the same thermal boundary as well as an air barrier, and she's clearly much more comfortable. She's probably inside. So we'll talk about these conditions and in fact, you always want to make sure that the where the thermal boundary is located next to directly touching the air barrier. All these things are fundamental things I know you're thinking about. So we know that air insulation cannot be an air barrier, but some can. I understand that foam and rigid foam does do that as long as it's sealed 100%. So ear sealing requires a professional, exposure pathway reduction requires a professional, and also requires a blower door. So these are the things that I think are necessary. You can assume where you have leakage, but you're really not going to find all of it unless you're doing a thorough job of doing a pressure boundary and determining what those are. So if many of you that are actually all doing these, I want to encourage you that this is a great way to improve the performance of the home. And now I'm going to tell you to stop. That's right. Stop air sealing because many people are doing it and they're not actually addressing the consequences of doing it. Some homes now you can actually do aero barrier, which if you're not sure what that is, it's actually a spray goo that you can do in ducts, and now they have one that actually works in the house. You can make homes super tight. Homes that were air change per hour of 20 can now be brought down to somewhere below 3 in a matter of a few hours. And if you're not addressing mechanical ventilation when you go to air seal, you may be better off to just let the home breathe as it is and suffer the consequences of the energy penalty versus making a home super tight and not understanding how it's going to ventilate. And to me, one extra fart fan in somewhere in the middle of the house isn't exactly mechanical ventilation, although that's what our current accepted standard is. So the goal is to figure out what is it you need to do to make a really good ventilated envelope if you're going to go in and do air sealing and thermal upgrades. I'm going to run through some blower door stuff. I know this is stuff you're very familiar with. I know that HPIP has done a great job of integrating this concept with a lot of their training materials. I was doing that when I was still at Retrotech, and I know that Clint and others have been promoting this as a concept too. Let's figure out a way to air seal and insulate at the same time. So of all the things that are probably related to your industry, this is the most powerful tool that's out there because of what it's actually doing. So clearly, we're going to be measuring not just the air sealing and the exposure pathways, but the heat transfer. But let's all find out what are some of the zonal areas because those are the exposure pathways we want to trim down. I always ask everybody, especially if the home is occupied, clearly, if it's not occupied, these things have less of an impact. But are you talking to your occupants before you turn on the door? Okay. I'll talk briefly about the COVID updates, but in general, does anybody in the house have asthma, allergies, or other respiratory conditions? And if they say yes, then let's figure out, is this the best time to potentially stir up conditions in their home, depending on what the home looks like or how old or new it is, right? Did you visually inspect the crawl space or the attic and kind of the duct system to find out how leaky is it or how nasty or how bad it was? Was the attic full of vermiculite? I'm not fond of doing a blower door when they have those kind of conditions in the house. It's a crawl space full of moisture in a variety of mold growth. Am I potentially bringing that into the house? So inspect before you do that. So then once you're going to do that, then you want to set a bunch of things up that you can do quickly. So you should be doing a pressure pan test or zonal pressure diagnostics to determine the connectivity of the crawl space or the attic and the garage. The garage is one of those places that has a whole lot of nasty contaminants that you're trying to reduce. So here I can actually determine, is the attic connected or is the garage connected? And if it was not, it would be equal pressure from inside or it would be zero for outside. So those are the things you're trying to determine. And many people are doing the spray foam attic on the roof line. and now I should be inside. So the inside should be fairly connected. If it's not, then you actually have vented an attic that's now trapping moisture. So this is one way to confirm, is that attic connected inside, or is it actually still connected to outside? Outside would have been 50, inside would be 0. It's rare to get a 0 kind of pressure connection. And you can use the same concept to go around to find all kinds of openings. Are the can lights leaking? Am I having issues around the receptacle? Where are the leakage, and how do I focus that? Because it isn't the receptacle that leaks. It's what's inside the wall, whether it's coming through something on the back side of the wall, it's coming through the attic or the crawl space. That's where you need to seal. It doesn't help to put a little cover on top of the receptacle. And I made a comment on LinkedIn recently about that. That's not the solution. So, and if you follow the blue line here, the blue line is where's the air barriers. Commonly, it's the drywall, it's the flooring, it's those things. But when you look up, it's actually anything that actually now penetrates the drywall. So it's your duct system is now your air barrier. Your can lights, your junction lights, that is now the air barrier system. So if your ducts are not well sealed, you are now compromising your air barrier system. All right. So that's why you don't think of those as a separate mechanical system. As soon as anything that penetrates the drywall is now part of the air barrier. And supply leakage sucks because they both start with S if you want to keep track of that. Like supply leakage sucks on the house. You're losing the supply on one side, and it has to make that up from somewhere. That motor that's on your unit still is going to turn the same amount of CFM no matter what's happening. So it's going to bring air from outside. So if you have a hot water tank, an older home that's direct draft, that can actually backdraft a unit. So if you're looking to address issues, so you may think that, okay, I'm going to seal up the supply leak, and as soon as I seal up the supply leakage, then what happens on the other side? I have return leakage, right? So now, if I said, oh, I measured it and I could tell that there was a huge supply gap. As soon as I made that the reduced, now my return leakage was even higher. So that's actually a better thing to have. So you want to be careful. Sometimes you may see something. I'll reverse that. You may see something on the bottom left, like, wow, what a big gap that is, and I fixed that, and then my supply leakage was now the primary. And you want to be making sure you're aware of combustion appliances, backdrafting, and follow what are now very common sense testing mechanisms to determine that you're not causing a backdraft or combustion issue in the home. And here's what happened. I tried to convince a group of HVAC contractors that they were the reason that the home failed the air sealing test because their ducts leaked. They leaked around the registers, and all that had a significant impact. It's not the electrician, it's not the plumber, that they are just as much of a risk in terms of having exposure pathways that are directly connected to the outside. Okay, we have one more poll question here. So the poll question is, we'll have to bring it up for you. You can respond. Which of these is an annual 30 plus $billion impact on healthcare? So the options are carbon dioxide poisoning, carbon monoxide poisoning, kitchen fires, trip fall accidents, or drownings. So which of these do you guys think is like, this is one of the things that's causing a 30 plus $billion impact on healthcare? All right, let's see what we got. So I tricked you guys. I tricked all of you. So I did it intentionally because I was knew that this would not be something common. Many of you probably clicked on carbon dioxide and thought it was carbon monoxide. Many of you thought carbon monoxide was it, and that actually is not. It's trip fall accidents are $1 billion industry on healthcare, even higher. So here's some of the most common causes of healthcare injuries and deaths. There probably is a place for carbon monoxide poisoning on here, but it isn't something that shows up as such a significant number. We hear about it in the news because it is such a tragic condition that happens from people or even families that this happens to. But let's talk about this as such a simple add-on for things you may be doing in a home or even pointing them out. There are entire companies in Florida right now that are doing this as an industry. They just go to the home and are putting bars in the bathroom, adding extra handrails, changing the carpets, giving them education about using slippers, changing the lightings, all to reduce trip fall accidents. Because it isn't just an impact on the industry; it's an impact on the person. An average trip to the hospital is over 30. It can be up to 18 to $30,000 just for that trip, including some of the rehabilitation that they have to do afterwards. So again, this is something that they're predicting is going to be a major impact upon homes and businesses, and a major opportunity for people who understand that in terms of the amount of people that are getting older in their homes and a major risk that's there. So, if when you notice you're going down the stairs and there is no handrail, those are the things to be mentioning. The picture on the right, that's not a handrail. That is just some board on the side that's not really graspable. Both of these conditions are incredibly unsafe, and it doesn't matter who's in that home now. You may be thinking about maybe they have their grandparents visiting or their parents visiting, or the next homeowner may be looking at those kind of conditions. So these are some of the basic stuff that have been shown to do this. Vermont and Connecticut did major studies where they actually were able to go in and do education, improve lighting, provide slippers, and change some of the conditions on the stairs and other areas, and they reduced it significantly from anywhere from 94% down to 9%. So accidents will happen, but injuries can be prevented. We'll talk briefly about filtration because this is something that I think hits home for a lot of people, incredibly now because due to COVID. Okay, so there are some things. Oh, I did mention about the blower door with COVID. So one of the things that's out there now is that people are using the blower door to just flush the house. They open up a bunch of windows in the house. They ask the occupants to not be in the house. Everybody's got a mask on, and they turn the blower door on and just literally have all the windows, especially on the back side of the house, but in general you're just trying to flush out as much conditions that are in the house before you do your assessment. So that's one thing that people are doing now. Before you do your test, you're going to close all the windows again. So there is no better benefit to actually doing this and improving the filtration and the flow that moves into the filter than things I'll recommend right now. So this is a study that was done by Linda Wigington out in Pennsylvania with Raucus. You definitely want to look her up because they do some amazing studies with IQ devices. So you can see on the left what they had, and on the right they improved the flow and were able to get the full effect of the 4-inch filter across there. All right, and when they did the study, because they have a really great Dilose particle meter, so they did the before and then they did the after. You can see that green is good and red and yellow are bad. So they use a pleated filter, and one is outdoor readings, and you can see that the conditions from outdoor were getting indoor on the left side there before. Afterwards, outdoor still stayed the same, but the indoor was clearly working in terms of upgrading that filter and making the roamer was the bedroom and the other part was the rest of the house. So this is, if nothing else, a major improvement to the house. You can actually realize you're getting way ahead of the curve here. And ventilation, this is something that is a significant upgrade, but it is something that people are talking about. So I encourage you to figure out a way to talk to people about that, and figure out a way to understand what they're looking for. It may just be an upgraded bath fan that's actually working better, but in general, I think the balanced ventilation system is going to come into play. I just got a few quick slides here that I'm going to go through. These are people that are doing probably what you're doing now. They're doing insulation and air sealing and disguising it indirectly as healthy home benefits. Okay, because they understand that. So this is out of California. This is buildingdoctors.com. So you can see they're doing blower door tests. They're talking about energy loss. They do talk about bulbs and other stuff that you can do to improve that. They're improving insulation and they're doing air sealing. And they got the whole kit. They dress up. They dress the part. All of their techs go out in a ambulance, and you can see that this is something that is working well. Out of Maryland is Total Home Performance. They do the same thing. They've been doing insulation. They do also do HVAC upgrades, and they're also doing insulation and air sealing, as well as some mechanical upgrades, maybe for ventilation. They're just now getting into whole home ventilation. Again, they find a huge success because they changed their dialogue to get people to be more interested in the health side. This is a group out of San Francisco. They do install ERVs. You can see they're doing the crawl space encapsulation. They're doing air sealing in the attic and improving the thermal boundary that goes along with that, as well as they also monitor. They give the people an IAQ monitor. And you may be familiar with Rob Minnick. He's very active in the industry. He actually is an HVAC contractor who does total home performance. If you need an electrician, he'll send somebody over to fix that. If you need a HVAC contractor, they do that in-house. If you need to get your crawl space sealed, he's got somebody to do that. His father believed that if you need something done, there's no reason for you to call somebody else. I will make sure that your family and your condition gets resolved, and let's figure out a way to do that together. So these are some of my wrap up slides. So If you've not seen this, you should go on it. You can look up Verilux, and you can go to this YouTube link. And you should also, it's called the Indoor Generation. It's a 160-second video that talks about how much time we spend indoors and what that's doing. I encourage you to understand what aero barrier is doing for the house. I think in the future that all homes will end up having an aero barrier system installed. I think in the next 10 years, it will be a common disclosure that yes, our home is tight, and because of aero barrier, within 3 hours they can do what a whole team of 5 to 10 people can barely do over a couple of days. So I think it is something that you should be more aware of. So in conclusion, I have the concept that I've had this for many, many years, that all the chemicals are matter, the particulates matter, homes matter, all occupants matter, is all we need to do is start tracking how we're improving those conditions on the basic energy upgrades that we're doing right now. So that's my email if you want to reach out to me. I'll throw us a couple links into the chat window. There we go.
Thanks, Joe. Kristen here. We did get a couple of questions, and we got quite a few questions, but I'll try and ask one that came up more than once. I'll sort of summarize it here. If there's a known issue with a whole home being a problem, what is the first or most important thing to do to make it a healthy home? And the second part of that is, where's the most bang per buck? Like, what should a family do first if there's multiple issues?
Yeah. So Kirsten, you know that I'm always upfront. So if I had a choice between improving insulation and doing air sealing, I always go for air sealing because it will give me the immediate reduction of exposures, right? After that is a good time to do that. And there's a diminishing return and a variety of stuff. But to me, if you're going to do one, you will just create a package for that. The second one is to start filtering what's in the house. So those are the things that I think are give it. So that upgrade that I showed you that redid the ductwork on the left side, that's a $600 upgrade for an average HVAC contractor, but it will provide huge amount of great returns on the occupants. Is one of my those are the two things I recommend highly: air sealing, improve the thermal boundary, and filtration.
Great, thank you. There was another question. Let's see here. Are you aware of what health improvements Mr. Hayward's family saw once the house was
Yeah, yeah,
finally in
yeah.
their new home?
Yeah, it's a great question. So it took him probably over a year to recover. All right, so he is now fully recovered, but they are now hypersensitive to a lot of stuff. So they are can't really go to any hotel and stay. There's a variety of things that they can no longer do. But his wife was able to get pregnant. They had twins, and all of his kids are healthy and have lived normal lives. And he's been able to use that as a call to action to try to help others with this cause.
Wow, that's quite a story. Let me see if there are any other questions here. We've got one more. From Sean Miller, says, thank you very much for the presentation. If you have any other questions, go ahead and type it into the question box now or the chat window, and Joe will answer those. Otherwise, we are coming right up on the hour. That was a lot of good information. Thank you, Joe.
Well, I appreciate people to come to do this, and I think we should try and do this maybe again in the early winter as a kind of an update.
I agree. Let me see if there are any other questions, and I think Stacy had a couple words in closing.
Yes, thank you, Joe. If we don't have any other questions, then our session is coming to a close. As a reminder, this episode is eligible for one continuing education unit towards High Performance Certified Contractors CE requirements and Certified Job Corps Instructor CE requirements. If you would like to receive credit for today's session, please leave a message in the chat box. In 2 weeks, we hope you will be able to join us again for a presentation by Kevin Weir on how to troubleshoot air leakage in single-family homes. In that session, Kevin will discuss detailed framing techniques, product and application concepts for air reduction, and simple tricks to help reduce unwanted airflow into the home before and after sheetrock has been installed. We hope you will be able to join us on November 4th. Be sure to get registered on our website. Thank you all again for joining us today, and we hope you have a great rest of your week.
I'm going to pause you for 1 second before everybody runs. I've threw chats
Yep.
into the some links into the chat, but there was one that I skipped over because of time, and I just wanted to throw that back out. And that is that if you're not familiar with the Healthy Building Network, right? This is a group that's non-for-profit. They actually test some of the conditions, but this group is designed specifically for our industry. So these are healthier upgrade materials, and here's actually specific guidance on insulation and air sealing materials that they put together as to good, better, best, and some of the risks that happen. And they've even got a website that focuses on. Oh wait, I'm not showing it. Sorry, 1 second. Show. Okay, there we go. They have a website that actually allows you to pick a variety of materials to go through, and these are their guides that they actually have out. And I put the links in your chat window. So if you're looking for more information, get connected with Healthy Building Network, and they're constantly upgrading. Their site's full of great information that's specific about the things that we're normally doing in a house. So thanks.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Yeah, I think we're wrapped up. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks a lot.